diplomatic achievement coming out of this summit. But on the other hand, there has been some signals that the President Obama seems to be quite disappointed by lack of progress with regard to the Trans-Pacific Partnership with Japan.
Well, it looks like President Obama sort of sides for the home team when he's speaking with the people there. Clearly, the media coverages are showing that the Chinese people are not happy with what's been coming out with the close discussion between the Japanese leader and President Barack Obama. If that trend continues, maybe he will be doing something similar in Korea if the two leaders choose to decide to discuss the issue of territorial subjects, which is, of course, causing a lot of tension between U.S.'s very strong allies, Korea and Japan.
You're absolutely right that talking about territorial issues should be very sensitive in most of the cases. And that is why I think that the chance should be extremely low for President Park Geun-hye and President Obama to actually discuss the territorial issue lying between South Korea and Japan, because the bottom line is that this is a summit meeting between U.S. and South Korea, not a summit meeting that is primarily designed to discuss anything related to Korea, Japan.
Right, and maybe it's because that his previous venue of state visit was Japan. President Barack Obama visited the Gyeongbokgung Palace earlier today before heading to the presidential office of Cheongwon-dae. And reportedly, this is the first time that a U.S. president has visited the Gyeongbokgung Palace or a national treasure of South Korea's. Your take on that?
Right, you're absolutely right that this is a fourth visit by U.S. President Obama to South Korea, which is unprecedented. And both governments had advertised this summit meeting as a meeting between two old friends. So although there is a lot of pragmatic elements in this summit meeting between South Korea and United States, but at the same time, this is a good opportunity for both countries and their people to confirm the long history of friendship and exchange of culture and people. And it is only appropriate for President Obama to demonstrate his deep appreciation of traditional Korean culture, making a tour to Gyeongbok Palace.
And also this old friend, a representative of the old friend of Korea, is bearing some incredible gifts on this trip to Korea, I believe.
Right, right. So it is a good opportunity for U.S. President to enhance the level of U.S. public diplomacy to South Korea and its people.
Right. So I believe that he will be, or he's expected to be returning lost royal seals back to South Korea. Now let's get to the core of their bilateral talks discussions. What we're expecting at this point is, of course, North Korea, and this comes amid talks of the possibility of a fourth nuclear test carried out by North Korea, rising very quickly. Now, what do you think is the kind of message that the two leaders will have for North Korea?
The core agenda of this summit meeting includes demonstrating a joint stance against North Korea's provocative action with conventional means as well as missile and nuclear weapons. So there will be a very stern warning coming out of this summit meeting by two leaders. Having said that, we have not received or confirmed enough evidence whether the North Korea's decision to postpone the actual nuclear test for the fourth time would be because of internal decisions, including their desire to keep the weapon-grade plutonium and enriched uranium for the latter period, or it was mainly due to the successful quote-unquote diplomatic intervention of China, or it is because of the demonstration of strong will by South Korea and its allies. So we are still in the realm of very wild and open speculation about North Korea's true intention with regard to the possible fourth nuclear test.
Well, history has taught us that April is the month of provocations, or month for them to make their mark. and communicate with the rest of the world in the most ill-advised manner. We still have a few days left in April. Do you see, I'm not expecting you to be an oracle, but in your opinion, do you see some sort of provocative action? Maybe not a fourth nuclear test, but something else in the pipelines?
If there is anything that North Korea's main intention to go ahead with another nuclear test, that would be its desire to strongly demonstrate that North Korea would not be succumb to any pressure from outside world. And it is conceivable that North Korean leadership was consciously targeting the time during President Obama's visit to Korea to maximize the demonstrative effect of its nuclear test. But had it gone with the possible original plan with the fourth nuclear test, then it would have been a disaster in terms of making South Korean public turn their backs from any inter-Korean dialogue and peaceful coexistence. Because think about it, South Korean people have been mourning the unfortunate death of innocent lives in the very tragic incident of sinking of ferry Sewol, and had North Korean leadership decide to go ahead with a nuclear test, arguing that North Korea, as a sovereign country, has its own right to conduct any military exercise and test for the sake of augmenting its deterrence capability against hostile powers, such as the United States, then it will be extremely ruinous in terms of North Korea's, well, quote unquote, public diplomacy to win hearts and minds of South Korean people. So no South Korean government would have been able to persuade the public to gain their support for higher level of inter-Korean cooperation. So that might have affected North Korea's strategic calculation to, at least for now, postpone another nuclear test.
Unpredictable, temperamental, but very calculative. That's North Korea for us.
Right. But I would say that there is no concrete evidence to actually verify what actually have been the main motivation of North Korean leadership.
Right.
And another variable is the upcoming visit by PRC, Chinese leader, President Xi Jinping, to South Korea. So North Korean leadership should be really careful in terms of deciding the timing and the format of another nuclear test.
Well, do we see China increasingly playing a role in I suppose, playing the mediator between North Korea and the rest of the world in terms of its nuclear weapons?
From the standpoint of Beijing, Chinese government has not wasted any or saved any effort to dissuade North Korea from engaging another rounds of provocative action, including another nuclear test and missile test. But it is one thing that Chinese government argue that it has done everything its own power to help change North Korea's behavior. And it is another to believe whether, whether Chinese government has actually made such an effort, and two, whether whatever China has done in order to influence North Korea's behavior has generated discernible outcomes in the direction of taking meaningful steps toward the denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. So we are still in a very uncertain stage to say otherwise. So we have to wait and see what kind of a long-term strategic decision the Chinese leadership has made in case North Korea decides to go ahead in order to augment its own nuclear and missile capability. So the ultimate test for China's willingness and determination to curb North Korea's behavior would require another case of North Korea's provocation.
Right. The news conference between the two leaders, Presidents Park Geun-hye and Barack Obama, were scheduled to begin roughly about 8 minutes ago at 5:30 p.m. Korea time. But we aren't getting news of that right now, which means I think the two leaders are deeply engaged in talks, and they continue to discuss various issues. One of them, I would speculate, could be President Park Geun-hye's Dresden speech on reunification, which North Korea outright rejected. Does President Obama support this, and do you expect some kind of talks to come out from the bilateral discussions today?
I would expect that there is a strong support expressed by President Obama coming out of this summit meeting, that Park Geun-hye administration's initiative to improve the inter-Korean cooperation and joint effort for peaceful coexistence and possible reunification is the correct one. We all remember that in the previous summit meeting between the two leaders in Washington, D.C. last May, that President Obama praised President Park Geun-hye's trust politic toward North Korea and said that it's exactly correct policy. So I would expect similar line of words in support and endorsement can be expected with regard to the vision of unification expressed by President Park in Dresden.
Well, you had the drone incident not too long ago, and I'm sure that is also spurring new topics of discussions with what U.S.-Korea alliances should do in the future. We're in a sort of a transitional phase with the OPCON talks still ongoing. What do you think would be some of the major discussions topics being covered between President Barack Obama and President Park Geun-hye as to the future of the Korea-U.S. or ROK-U.S. alliance?
They are believed to be engaged in a very serious talk on molding the future of the bilateral security partnership, as I said. And the focus should be what to do about the scheduled return, transfer of the wartime upland from the U.S. FK to Korea. And all these very specific challenges and their agreement with regard to how to cope with them are likely to be discussed in the very broad framework of a discussion focused on the transfer of the wartime upland.
Well, we are getting reports that the bilateral summit between the two presidents have not yet come to an end. Therefore, I think it will be a little bit of a while until this joint news conference happens. Now, speaking of which, do you think TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, was also discussed during the bilateral summit?
I would expect that the TPP must have been on the table for discussion between the two leaders, but compared to the case of Japan-U.S. negotiations over the TPP, the U.S.-Korea case is slightly different because the first step for both countries to gain momentum for the eventual conclusion of the TPP, I mean Korea joining TPP, is both sides narrowing the gap of the opinions with regard to the current status of the KORUS FTA. So unless they become on the same page with regard to the current status of the KORUS FTA, because there is some domestic reservations inside the United States expressed by some members of U.S. Congress and the USTR that the South Korea has not been most diligently fulfilling its end of the agreements with regard to the KORUS FTA. So rendering support for South Korea joining TPP might be premature. So how to overcome and alleviate such a concern and opposition inside the United States must have been a big task for the Park Geun-hye administration in terms of making its effort to push forward toward the TPP.
Now, we are seeing a little bit of activity in the joint news conference room at Cheongwon-dae, so it might be happening in the next few minutes. But as for President Barack Obama's Asia tour this time around, what is the ultimate goal, or what is he trying to achieve through this Tokyo, Seoul, and then Malaysia and the Philippines tour?
The ultimate goal for President Obama's Asia tour is to first confirm and demonstrate the strong will and the determination of the United States to protect its allies in Northeast Asia, and the second, to demonstrate the U.S. staying power to fulfill its rebalancing policy toward Asia. And there's some speculation that his tour to Japan and summit meeting with Prime Minister Abe might have not met his original expectation, because visible progress with regard to the TPP was largely regarded as important, as a pillar, one of the pillars for the rebalancing policy of the United States as the U.S.-Japan security partnership. So in order for the rebalancing policy to take more shape in the eyes of the allies and other countries, the economic pillar of the Asia rebalancing policy should be made more clearer.
Well, one thing clear about difference between Prime Minister Abe and, of course, President Park Geun-hye is Abe seems ready to speak, and not really the most attentive person there when it comes to face-to-face talk. It seemed like there was a lot of buzz going on, a lot of activities, but not a lot of substantial interaction or exchange of ideas during the visit to Japan by President Barack Obama. Clearly, what's different here in Korea is already they are still behind closed doors, delaying the news conference because they are continuing with talks, with interactions. I believe we will have something more fruitful here in Korea compared to Japan, or is it just my flawed misconception?
You know, what I'm paying particular attention to as the outcome of this summit meeting between President Park and President Obama is what kind of agreement would be made with regard to advancing the KORUS FTA. As I said in my previous remark, that I don't think President Obama has earned as much progress with regard to U.S.-Japan on the TPP as he hoped before coming to Asia. So if the Park Geun-hye administration successfully demonstrate the genuine commitment to address and help resolve the U.S. concern about KORUS FTA, which is regarded as a prelude to U.S. and South Korea making joint effort for South Korea's joining the TPP, then in the comparative perspective, that could be regarded as a huge diplomatic victory of Park Geun-hye administration.
Well, definitely. So it's 46 past 5 p.m. The joint news conference between the two presidents was supposed to happen at 5:30 p.m. So we're about 16 minutes delayed or over time, and we are seeing the venue of the joint news conference on the screen right now. This is at the presidential office of Cheongwadae in Seoul, Korea, and we were supposed to be giving you, for those of our viewers waiting for this joint news conference at 5:30 p.m. But it seems like the hour-long bilateral summit is going over time, and Presidents Park and Obama are discussing the bilateral summit for
we should
over
take it on a
an hour now.
positive note that they have so much more to discuss, and it's not a closed door, a brief 1, 2, 3, 4 exchanges, and let's put a stop to this and move on with the program, which is a great thing, I believe, rather than definitely in stark contrast to what happened in Japan there. More interaction, more conversations, and they could segue a little bit to other topics and focus on many other topics of discussion between U.S. and Korea at the moment. It is unfortunate that the conference is being postponed quite a bit. It is getting a little bit restless there at the venue. People seem to be leaving their seats and whatnot, but good things come to those who wait, and I do have faith that we will have something worth the wait in just a few minutes' time.
Well, another thing is that this is President Barack Obama's first visit to Korea since President Park Geun-hye took office. It seems to me that the visit could be viewed as a bit too short as the first visit by the U.S. president under this administration. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you can say that, but at the same time, there's a positive aspect of having this summit meeting in Seoul. This time, because South Korea was not originally part of the legs, 3 legs of Obama's Asia tour, which was by and large decided in order to assure the Asian, allies and countries about the U.S. commitment to regional security and prosperity, which took place because of the sudden absence of President Obama at the APEC summit meeting. But South Korea was later added as one of the 4 destinations of the President Obama's Asia tour. So in that regard, albeit this is a rather short state visit by President Obama, but in a positive light, the fact that South Korea was included in his itinerary, it could be a very positive achievement from the standpoint of South Korean government.
Now, North Korea's nuclear threats, of course, nuclear activities, nuclear program is going to be one of the main agendas being discussed between the 2 leaders, I believe. And perhaps with North Korea being speculated to carry out a 4th nuclear test, even if not now, sometime in the near future. Perhaps do you think the 2 leaders might have discussed easing the preconditions for North Korea to come back to the 6-party denuclearization talks?
It's possible that both leaders might have discussed the pros and cons of easing the preconditions for North Korea to come back to the tables of dialogue and negotiations. But I believe that the chance of South Korea and the United States actually proceed to lower the bar for North Korea to come back to receive the benefits, economic and otherwise, from the international society is still on the low side because there's too much uncertainty with regard to the strategic thinking and policy behavior of the Kim Jong-un administration, especially in the aftermath of the shocking purge of his uncle, Chang Sang-tae, last winter. So I would say that United States and South Korea and even China are on the rather in the waiting mode to gain the better understanding and insight about the logical behavior of the Kim Jong-un regime in North Korea prior to making any actual decision about the level of barriers for North Korea to have an opportunity to receive the economic and political benefits in exchange for making some steps toward the goal of denuclearization. We have to patiently wait and see.
There hasn't been a lot of positive progress on North Korea's part in terms of opening its doors to the rest of the world or trying to ease tensions with the rest of its surrounding neighbors or the countries that once it punished. Unfortunately, they continue to surprise us with some significant developments in terms of their warfare and weapons tactics and technology so far with the drones. And of course, they've warned about a different kind of nuclear test this time. Could you perhaps elaborate and maybe help us speculate what we can expect when they say something different and something new this time?
What we can expect from North Korea is that it is not safe to bet anything on North Korea's behavior because North Korea is an extremely unpredictable system. The one point to watch future behavior of North Korea with regard to missile nuclear development is that what is driving North Korea's choice between further testing their nuclear capacity and testing their missile capability, because in order for any countries to become genuine and real nuclear state, then you have to have 2 elements. One is the reliable nuclear warhead, but at the same time, you also have the reliable delivery system to target. But it seems like North Korea is more advanced with regard to the first capacity, the nuclear warheads, but rather lagging behind in terms of developing reliable long-range delivery systems that would carry the nuclear warheads. So from the purely strategic and military standpoint, if North Korea's main goal is to become genuine nuclear power, then the focus of its efforts should be testing more intercontinental missile or satellites. But from the standpoint of trying to gain political effect of their military behavior, then North Korea may opt to have another nuclear test. So
Right.
it's very hard to predict which course of action North Korean regime would actually take.
As always, unpredictable. Now, we are getting reports that the bilateral summit between the two presidents have come to an end, and they're actually right now currently undergoing or carrying out a ceremony, returning ceremony of the royal seals that the U.S. president has brought with him. What is the significance there?
Well, as I said, that it's a very clear sign that the United States remains, as it always been, a true friend of South Korea. And President Obama is a very unique political figure. If you look back, his political track record. And it is very unfortunate that South Korea has been dealing with the shock of very accident, but the U.S. President Obama has this unique capability as inspiring political leader, commanding high respect in the entire international society when it comes down to giving support and genuine condolences to the victims in natural disasters. Before he embarked on his Asian tour to East Asia, actually he made a visit to the other site of the mudslide incident in the state of Washington. And he also had to, as a leader of the United States, extended the condolences and support to the victims and their families in the aftermath of the very tragic shooting incident in the Newtown, Connecticut.
Right, that's
So
why he is one of the most loved, respected, and most books that's got the name Barack Obama on it seems to sell like pancakes here in South Korea. I think we'll have to cut our conversation short here because
we
have
are
some
seeing
developments.
activities at the venue of the joint conference, news conference. For those of us just joining us, we are bringing you a live coverage of a Korea-U.S. summit joint news conference. U.S. President Barack Obama arrived in Seoul on the second leg of his Asia tour after Tokyo earlier this Friday afternoon, and which was expected to be an hour-long bilateral summit between President Park Geun-hye and President Barack Obama. They have gone overboard and they talked for a longer time, and after a returning ceremony of the kind of royal seals that President Barack Obama brought with him, I think we will be seeing a joint news conference happening at the presidential office of Cheongwade anytime soon. Of course, here in the studio, joining us live to help us through this joint news conference is Dr. Bong Young-sik, Senior Research Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies, and he will stay with us throughout this joint news conference. But we are seeing the joint news conference, and it looks like it will be happening any minute. However, it has been delayed about half an hour because the two leaders have been discussing, I suppose, engaged in this very deep talks for the past hour and a half.
Right, so we won't be surprised if they have any more last-minute conversations to take place, or if there are slightly more longer postponements. But nonetheless, we take it as a good sign. But it seems like everyone is finding their seats. At the moment, it's getting a lot busier and it's more bustling with life compared to, let's say, 15 minutes ago.
Right,
Looks like it will
and
take
following
place
after
anytime.
this joint news conference, Presidents Park Geun-hye and Obama are expected to take a walk around the presidential office for about 10 minutes. So they will have some alone time then as well. But, I suppose this is a sign that they really do have a friendly relations between the two leaders. And I think we will be seeing a joint news conference happening sometime soon. Of course, at the top of the agenda this time around as well would have been North Korea and joined united front between South Korea and the U.S. on tackling or on dealing with North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Of course, also expected to have been discussed, I believe, would be peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia in light of territorial and historical disputes between Japan and the rest of the Northeast Asian countries. Now, this time around, President Barack Obama brought with him lost royal seals, and that would mean a lot to the Korean people. And his visit comes amid a very difficult time for this country as we reel for the victims and as well as the families of those missing in the Sewol ferry disaster. And I believe President Barack Obama has expressed his condolences and for the victims and the families there.
Seeing how Mr. President Barack Obama, that is, when he comes, he does come bearing gifts and does not come visiting empty-handed. And I'm sure he has something extra special in store for us, and that is why the conversations keep on going between the two presidents behind closed doors. And he did express deep condolences, first and foremost, about the unfortunate event in Korea. And I believe he will also touch on that issue as well. He did express his willingness to offer any help, even dispatching their military vessels to help out with salvaging operations later on from Thailand, and that should happen maybe more quickly.
Right, and we are hearing announcements made at the venue of this joint news conference, saying that this South Korea-U.S. Summit joint news conference is just going to be happening just now. We're seeing Ambassador Sung Kim, U.S. Ambassador to Korea, there as well. And we will be seeing this joint news conference opening in just a little bit. Right. This is actually, of course, South Korea and the U.S. alliance and North Korea's nuclear threats. It's also a very closely watched event and topic all across the world. Therefore, much attention is being focused on this, and we are also seeing U.S. Trade Representative Wendy Cutler. Right.
A lot of the seats that were empty had the label U.S. delegates written on it, and I think those seats are filling up nicely right now. And it seems like the members of the press are standing by on the edge of their seats or on the tip of their toes, eagerly awaiting for this historic event to take place. The foreign visitors are checking in their earpieces to make sure the translations or interpretations are flowing smoothly. And it looks like the preparations are all set up, and it will be just minutes, if not seconds, until the two very important faces step up to the podium and deliver what is expected from them and much more.
Right, we're seeing South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se there as well. I'm sure he was with President Park Geun-hye and President Obama during their talks, at least for a part-time. And yeah, we're hearing that simultaneous interpretations will be available both in Korean and English as the joint news conference proceeds. And we're still waiting for that. And right, I mean, this is the joint news conference was supposed to happen about half an hour ago at 5:30 p.m. Korea time, but the bilateral summit, of course, had been, I suppose, lengthened, and we are still waiting for this joint news conference to happen. It's a minute past 6 p.m., and it looks like the South Korea-U.S. Summit News Conference will happen any minute now, but we're still waiting. And of course, in the studio, we have Dr. Pong Young-sik, a Senior Research Fellow at the Asan Institute of Policy Studies, joining us and helping us through this summit conference.
The silence still continues at the event venue, unfortunately. People still trying to, some of them adjusting their seats, and a lot more conversation going on at the moment. They are growing a little bit nervous about how long the wait is going to be. But it's been over half an hour, and a couple of more minutes will not make much of a difference. The only difference that we have is that the two leaders will be discussing more broader subjects or focusing in one particular subject, probably something to do with North Korea in more details. That is always a good sign. And once they hash out their views,
that's right.
And once they're out in the podium, we can expect something better. I think it's sort of like baking. You know, you wait for the dough to sit and rise. You don't have to rush everything, and sometimes that can be a very positive outcome.
Right, and we are hearing reports that Prior to starting their bilateral summit, President Park Geun-hye and President Barack Obama held a moment of silence for the victims of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster for roughly 30 seconds, and that's how they started up, or they kicked off their bilateral summit, by paying tribute or remembering those who perished in this very tragic accident. And there we see, I suppose, a very close alliance or very friendly relations between the two countries who have called each other sister and brother countries before. And we did see U.S. President Barack Obama expressing his condolences before he set off for this Asia tour, calling it heartbreaking. And of course, and that is how they begun their bilateral summit today as well.
Initially, we thought other subjects will take center stage and it might be something on the sidelines, but it seems like they place emphasis and focus on, of course, the tragic event that led to a lot of loss of lives and led to a lot of changes being needed in terms of safety measures and response time here in South Korea. And of course, we are getting a lot of criticism and praise as well from around the world for our ability to deliver a lot of all-out search efforts with joint efforts between the government level, military, and of course civilian levels, and sometimes the civilian divers having much more experience to share and offer. And it is unfortunate, yes, but however, we will have to get over the hump and focus on the matter at hand right now. The bigger issue at the moment for us to tackle is, of course, North Korea, who did promise, or always they would like to make declarations before they take action about a possible fourth nuclear test, which will be the core subject of discussion, or subject that needs to be debated between the two sides, South Korea and U.S.
Right. For those of you just joining us, this is Arirang News live coverage of South Korea-U.S. Summit News Conference. President Barack Obama arrived in Seoul earlier this Friday afternoon on the second leg of his Asia tour, following the one in Tokyo. Now, after this one, which is a 2-day-long visit, he will be flying off to Malaysia and the Philippines to wrap up his Asia tour. He met with Prime Minister Abe and had a little bit of what people have been calling sushi diplomacy in Tokyo. And after that, he is now in Seoul. And more than anything, I think President Barack Obama is putting a lot of emphasis in consoling, giving comfort to those families who have lost their loved ones, or whose loved ones remain missing at this time in the Sewol-ho ferry sinking last Wednesday morning. Of course, here on Arirang, we have been bringing you special reports, special coverages all day long on the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. And even on this Friday, we continue our search and rescue efforts down off Korea's southwestern coast. And of course, we still cling on to that last bit of hope that there could be survivors. However, a lot of that hope has been glimmered or dimmed.
Right, it's diminishing by the hour, but of course we do not give up hope. We are clinging on to a possible miracle that could happen. Weather has been quite favorable in terms of the neap tides coming in to make sure the rescue operations are conducted a little bit smoothly without huge obstacles. And we did, of course, mention earlier that the rest of the world, they are eager and willing to help out in any way possible. And it looks like we have some developments on the venue. There are some members stepping up to the podium to possibly do some mic checks, and we will have the very significant event going on, being underway in a matter of minutes, I hope, perhaps seconds. There's been quite a long delay.
We did actually mention, but I'd like to say again that the two leaders, in fact, started off the bilateral summit by carrying out a moment of silence for those who perished in this ferry disaster off Korea's southwestern coast last Wednesday morning. President Obama reportedly expressed his deep sadness and condolences because so many young souls were lost this time around. Of course, more than 300 of the 400-plus passengers on board this ill-fated ferry were high school students on their field trip to Jeju Island, and that is why I think President Barack Obama really expressed his deep sadness over that. They also, I believe, discussed the Trans-Pacific Partnership and how they would like to negotiate on further to talk about achieving a higher level of Trans-Pacific Partnership, an economic trade deal, I suppose, on top of this bilateral Korea-U.S. FTA. And they also discussed, I suppose, reconsidering the OPCON transfer date,
right.
the operational control from the U.S. Forces Korea to South Korea, which had been at the top of the two countries' agenda for months now, in fact.
Right, the always imminent, ever imminent threat is, of course, North Korea, ever unpredictable and always eager to display their military might or to be acknowledged as a nuclear power state, always making some disturbing progress in that department. And of course, we will be focused on the two leaders will be focused on discussing the subject and, of course, finding ways to approach North Korea. It's never an easy subject because sometimes they do respond to conversational methods. Sometimes they respond to some display of force, like the joint exercise that we have going on, which seem to evoke a lot of emotional response from North Korea, be it sending drones or threatening to conduct another nuclear test in North Korea.
Right. Of course, at the top of the agenda was, of course, North Korea, and the two leaders are said to have called for, or strongly called for, North Korea to stop any of its nuclear activities and, in fact, denuclearize, I suppose. What's very interesting is President Barack Obama is said to have given magnolia flowers. Those are flowers, magnolia, for the Danwon High School students and teachers who are suffering this very traumatic loss, which is, of course, Danwon High School is where 300 and plus students were on board this ill-fated ferry, which sank off Korea's southwestern coast last Wednesday morning. And we have seen hundreds and hundreds of casualties, of death, and those missing there. And President Barack Obama, after holding a moment of silence with President Park Geun-hye, has delivered a magnolia flowers to be sent to Danwon High School in Ansan, the suburb area of Seoul. What you're seeing on your screen is the venue of the Korea-U.S. Summit Joint News Conference in Cheongwade, the presidential office of South Korea. President Barack Obama arrived here earlier this Friday afternoon, and upon arrival, he did go to the War Memorial to pay his tribute and then visited the Gyeongbokgung Palace, which would be the first time for a U.S. president to visit a national treasure of South Korea's, and then went off to the presidential office of Cheongwade at around 4 p.m. Korea time, where he was welcomed by a welcoming ceremony. And then afterwards, the two presidents are said to have sat down for bilateral talks. Obviously, it was supposed to be an hour-long discussion, but the two leaders have lengthened, and they have been speaking to each other, to one another, for longer than that.
Right. One reason why, it's because it's a very emotional time here in Korea, and I'm sure during some of the conversations, knowing these two leaders, they are very emotionally attached to everyone around them, and I'm sure they had to take their time trying to get over the emotional grief at the moment. President Barack Obama, of course, first and foremost expressed his deep condolences, and they took a moment of silence to pay tribute to the victims of the tragic ferry incident. And that is one of the major reasons why the conversation behind closed doors is taking a little bit longer. It's been postponed quite a while, and I think we should be getting the two leaders at the podium any moment. The members of the press and all the delegates at the venue are growing restless as we speak. They, of course, understand the overall atmosphere of South Korea at the moment, and we do hope that the two leaders will be coming out soon.
Right. I think we're just moments away from the two leaders coming out to the podium to take on and to address the reporters. I believe that each leader will have a statement, and then we'll be taking questions from the members of the press. And this entire procedure is scheduled to take about half an hour, but by the look of things, we don't know about that. It may take longer, or it could actually be on time. What we've experience so far with summit joint news conferences are that, most of the time they never start on time, because the two leaders always seem to have a lot more to discuss than expected.
It's a good sign when it doesn't start
right,
on
that's
time.
correct.
Usually, if it starts early, it means they cannot resolve their differences, or they do not have much in common, or they just want to get over the next step, which is not exactly the best sign. So this is a positive development for South Korea and the U.S.
We keep seeing U.S. Deputy Trade Representative Wendy Cutler. Of course, she was one of those figures from the U.S. side who masterminded or planned and designed the Korea-U.S. FTA. So I'm thinking that the economic issues such as the TPP topped the agenda between the two leaders this time as well. And we, of course, saw U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Sung Kim and South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, along with the Presidential Office's National Security Advisor there. And apparently, the two leaders, of course, as expected, strongly called for North Korea to denuclearize and to stop any nuclear activities that may be ongoing in the northern part of the Korean peninsula.
Now we see them approaching.
Right, we see President Park Geun-hye and President Obama
still holding some casual conversations at the moment.
Engaged in friendly talks, I believe, walking to the venue. This is not something that we see very often. So we
One
are
thing different
seeing
from
them.
the past is that we've had presidents before, but this is the first president that can actually hold a face-to-face conversation without an interpreter. So that is also one of the reasons why the conversation took a little bit longer.
All right, it seems like the joint news conference is just about to begin, and let's go over to the venue.
지금부터 대한민국 박근혜 대통령과 미 합중국 버락 오바마 대통령의 공동 기자회견을 시작하겠습니다. 오늘 기자회견은 두 분 정상의 회담 결과 발표와 질의 답변의 순으로 진행하겠습니다. 먼저 박근혜 대통령께서 회담 결과를 발표하시겠습니다.
오늘 한국을 방문하신
Yes,
오바마
I would like to sincerely welcome President Barack Obama for visiting Korea. And first of all, I would like to also deliver say to you that Barack Obama has also expressed his deepest condolences to the victims and the families of the Seoul ferry disaster, and I would sincerely thank him for that. And he has visited Seoul. Is the most visited city is Seoul for him, and this is what I've heard. And I believe that this attests to the deep affection that the United States shows to Korea, as well as for the development of Korea-U.S. alliance development. Recently, North Korea has also officially announced the possible conduct of nuclear tests. So we are experiencing a very grave situation. But President Obama was very clear in his message that we will not tolerate any types of provocations of North Korea. So he has also reaffirmed his commitment to do his best to deter North Korea, and we have also agreed to further consolidate the both ties of both countries. And the ties of both countries stand strong more than ever before. And the two leaders will also visit the U.S. Korea Forces Command tomorrow, and we will meet the U.S. soldiers in Korea. And the provocation of North Korea will bring a new type of pressure from the international society and community. And President and we have discussed about different measures as to how we can deter North Korea's provocations. What we would like to hope going forward is that North Korea makes the right choice to help its people. the President and I, we have also discussed that given the increasing nuclear threats of North Korea, we have also talked about the times and conditions of the transition of wartime operational control, and we have agreed that we can reconsider the time and the conditions of wartime operational control. And both leaders will also continue to strengthen the capabilities to deter North Korea. And we will also try to develop independently the Korean missile defense mechanism independently so that we can be able to independently manage the missile defense system. So we have also agreed to strengthen the security dialogue at the high level. And at the latter half of this year, we will have a 2+2 defense ministers meeting between the two countries. And this meeting will be a very important venue to further discuss the security future of the Korean Peninsula. The President and I will, based on these strong deterrents, will continue to work hard and to commit to lay the foundation for peaceful unification of the Korean Peninsula and also to strengthen ties of both countries. And to this end, it is very important to see progress of denuclearization of North Korea. Both leaders, we believe that there is the advancement of the modernization of nuclearization of North Korea. And we have agreed to further strengthen and implement the denuclearization of North Korea. To this regard, we look forward to working together to draw the common participation of the international community, and North Korea must know that if it continues the current status quo or the current stance, it is doomed to fail. In order to build the peace on the Korean Peninsula, I also talked to President Obama about my Dresden proposal. In 2012, as President Obama said, the peoples of North and South Korea should become a sovereign people and free people. And given the history of the world, the confrontations and the mistrusts between the two countries and the barriers of the cultures of both countries should be and will be dismantled. And in this process, I could actually, I believe that the message of hope should continue going forward, and in particular, humanitarian aid and to regain homogeneity of the inter-Koreans are essential. The peaceful reunification of Korea will offer new economic opportunities to Korea as well as our allies, and it will serve as an important cornerstone to strengthen the peace on the Korean Peninsula as well as Northeast Asia. Of course, North Korea has rightly rejected the Dresden proposal. However, such proposal will open the minimum chance for North Koreans to live well and to regain homogeneity of the inter-Koreans. And that is why it is important to stick to the principle and implement this initiative. The President and I have also shared our concern about the threats and the security threats in the Northeast Asia, and we have agreed to seek important measures and proactive measures to address this. And I believe that the U.S.'s rebalancing policy of rebalancing to Asia is also contributing to build peace in Northeast Asia, and I believe that the rebalancing to Asia policy is a very important reflection of the U.S.'s commitment to Northeast Asia. So Korea will also continue to work together with, and has worked together with the U.S. to address the global concerns. Korea and the U.S. have also worked on development assistance activities in the African regions. We are also working together together to combat climate change issues and to address concerns or issues regarding nuclear security. And we will continue to work in this regard. And another important axis of our alliance or cooperation is in terms of culture and economy. We have worked closely in these areas, and we will continue to work in these areas going forward. In particular, Korea-U.S. alliance, together with U.S.-Korea defense agreement, are very important pillars of the partnership, bilateral partnerships, and we believe that we need to expand these areas. So following the Korea-U.S. FTA, we will also try to look for potential discussions or partnerships that can be sought in the areas of TPP, and we will lead close discussions regarding the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The energy leaders and energy businesses of both countries have also strengthened their ties in the development of shale gas and so forth. And the leaders in the IT sector, in the aerospatial sector, have also conducted joint studies to expand the U.S.-Korea partnership into a new level. So in the 60 years' time, we have actually seen the return of a very precious royal seals to Korea today. And I believe all of these efforts will enrich the bilateral relations of both Korea and the United States. Korea and U.S. alliance has built a strong confidence and trust for the past 60 years, and we will continue to effectively respond to global issues, and we will also become the pillar and strengthen our relationship to become the pillar of the security of Northeast Asian region. So I would like to once again welcome the visit of President Obama, and I wish you good luck for the rest of your tour.
Well, thank you, President Park, for your kind words and warm welcome. I want to thank the people of South Korea for your enduring friendship and unfailing hospitality. As I said earlier, I know my visit comes at a time of great sorrow for your nation. And again, on behalf of all Americans, I want to express our deepest condolences, our edo, to all the families who lost loved ones on the ferry Sewol. So many were young students with their entire lives ahead of them. I'm a father of two daughters of the same age or close to the same age as those who were lost, and so I can only imagine what the parents are going through at this point, the incredible heartache. I've brought with me on this trip, in addition to the flag that I mentioned earlier, a magnolia tree from the south lawn of the White House. These magnolia trees have stood for more than a century, and they represent in our country beauty and with every spring renewal. The same quality is embodied by all those students. So during my visit, this tree will be presented to Danwon High School as a reminder of their beautiful lives and the friendship between our nations. And going forward, the United States will continue to offer whatever support we can provide as you respond to this tragedy. These difficult days remind us that whatever the challenges, our two nations stand together. Our alliance remains a linchpin of security in Asia. Our solidarity is bolstered by the courage of our service members, both Korean and American, who safeguard this nation. America's commitment to the South Korean people will never waver. And President Park, I want to thank you for your strong personal commitment to our alliance. I was honored to welcome you to Washington for your first foreign trip as president, and we've worked closely ever since. In our discussions today, we agreed to continue to modernize our alliance, including enhancing the interoperability of our missile defense systems. At the same time, President Park recommended, and I agreed, that given the evolving security environment in the region, including the enduring North Korean nuclear and missile threat, we can reconsider the 2015 timeline for transferring operational control for our alliance. Together, we'll ensure that our alliance remains fully prepared for our mission. With regard to North Korea, the United States and South Korea stand shoulder to shoulder, both in the face of Pyongyang's provocations and in our refusal to accept a nuclear North Korea. Threats will get North Korea nothing other than greater isolation. And we're united on the steps Pyongyang needs to take, including abandoning their nuclear weapons and ballistic weapons program and living up to their international obligations. Of course, we're also deeply concerned about the suffering of the North Korean people. And the United States and South Korea are working together to advance accountability for the serious human rights violations being committed by the North. I mentioned to President Park that the United States supports the Korean people's desire for unification, and I share President Park's vision, as you outlined, Madam President, in your recent speech in Dresden, of a unified Korea that's free from the fear of war and nuclear weapons. It's a vision of a unified Korea where people throughout this peninsula enjoy the political and economic freedoms that exist here in the South. Beyond this peninsula, our alliance is increasingly a global one. We're grateful for South Korea's partnership, from typhoon relief in the Philippines to humanitarian efforts in Syria. As Madam President mentioned, we're working closely on new clean energy technologies to address climate change, and with the international community on an ambitious new climate agreement. Around the globe, we're leaders in development because we want more people to experience the kind of incredible growth and progress that South Korea shows is possible. And finally, we agreed to continue expanding our extraordinary economic ties. Since we signed our free trade agreement 2 years ago, our overall bilateral trade has gone up. The United States is exporting more to South Korea, and South Korea is exporting more to the United States, which supports good jobs in both countries. Today, President Park and I discussed how we can make sure that we implement KORUS fully, which would also help ensure that South Korea can eventually meet the high standards of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So, President Park, thank you again for your partnership and for all that you've done to keep our alliance strong. I'm looking forward to our working dinner tonight. Time and again, we've seen how much our people can accomplish together, not just for our own countries, but for the security and prosperity of the people around the world. And we very much appreciate your leadership on that project. 감사합니다.
네, 지금부터는 기자분들의 질문을 받겠습니다. 한국 측 기자의 질문부터 받겠습니다. 질문하실 분은 지명이 되면 소속과 성명을 밝힌 뒤에 질문해 주시기 바랍니다. 네, 정준영 기자 질문해 주십시오.
Let's go ahead, Mr. Jung Jun-hyung. My name is Jung Jun-hyung of SBS. I have a question for President Park. Madam President, last month at Dresden, Germany, you've announced your unification initiative centering around the three main proposals for laying the groundwork for peace and unification, but North Korea flatly rejected and is continuing with its threats of provocation. In particular, North Korea is showing signs for an attempt at the fourth nuclear test. Against this backdrop, the two leaders said that there will be, at the opening statements, strong sanctions and against the posts against North Korea by the international society, and they will not, the two countries will not tolerate a nuclear test. I would like to know what the President's evaluation is. Is there a possibility of nuclear actually carrying out the nuclear test? And if the provocations are continued, if we are to improve and move forward the inter-Korean relations, are you considering a more flexible measure to be taken against the North? Nextly, with regards to the U.S.-Korea transfer of the wartime command, or the OPCON, the two leaders have said that they will review the timing and conditions for transfer. And if the transfer schedule is pushed back again, have you discussed with President Obama specifically on when that timing will be?
지금 우리가 판단
Yes, at the Korean government and also at the Defense Ministry, our assessment is that the North Korea is actually fully ready to carry out the fourth nuclear test. So it can actually carry out the test whenever it deems necessary. That is our assessment. We're not very certain of what the timing will be, but I think we believe that they are fully ready now. And this is a very tense situation. To come up with some flexible measure, that is your question. Actually, the Dresden Initiative is a case in point for win-win of the two Koreas and for improvement of the quality of life for the North Korean residents. It's indeed a flexible policy. But the North Korea is responding with threats of provocation and about carrying out nuclear tests. So this is a point that we really need to think seriously. With regards to the transfer of the OPCON, Korea and the United States have decided that the basic direction should be to strengthen the Chorus combined defense posture. We believe that it should not incur any negative situations on the defense posture for the Korea. And therefore, against the heightening tension of the threats, currently, the timing is 2015. But we have agreed that we could revisit this issue about reviewing the timing and conditions for transfer. So currently, I don't think it is quite appropriate that I give you the exact timing or the conditions. But the authorities, the defense authorities of the two countries will be able to come to a coordination effort together. And that is what we will do to encourage the defense authorities to move forward.
Reuters, Matt Spitalnik.
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam President. Mr. President, you have stated that you're teeing up sanctions on Russia, but the Europeans are divided on how far they want to go. Can you tell us what, if any, consultations you plan to have with European leaders to nudge them forward, and are you worried that this could delay the process? Also, Mr. President, at a time when your attention is needed on the Ukraine and other world crises, is it now time to throw in the towel on the Middle East peace effort, especially now that that Israel has dropped out of the talks? I also have a question for you, Madam President, and condolences on your country's tragic loss. Madam President, given that South Korea and Japan have important shared security interests in the region, what, if anything, can your government do to get past this ritual of bitter dispute over Japan's World War II militarist past? Thank you.
Well, with respect to Ukraine, the consultation with my European counterparts has been constant, not just over the last several weeks, but for the last several months. And, I have been deeply encouraged by the unity that you've seen between the United States, Europe, Canada, and many countries around the globe, uniformly condemning Russia's actions in annexing Crimea, uniformly condemning Russia further meddling in Ukraine, and the destabilizing activities that are taking place in the south and the east. And both the Europeans and the United States have been consistent in calibrating sanctions that could provide a deterrent to the Russians, providing support to the Ukrainians, leaving open a path for resolving this problem diplomatically. Now, as I said yesterday, what we've seen since the Geneva Agreement is the Ukrainian government has been carrying out the terms of that agreement. It's introduced legislation providing amnesty to those that would lay down arms and exit from these government buildings that have been occupied. It has put forward a process for constitutional reform that ensures the rights of all Ukrainians. And it's a credible document, one that's been presented to the Council of Europe and is getting input throughout Ukraine, as well as from experts outside of Ukraine in constitutional reform. And so what you've seen is the government in Kiev doing what it said it would do. What we have not seen is Russia speaking out clearly that condemning the pro-Russian militias that have taken over these buildings and using its influence to de-escalate the crisis. So I'll be talking to the Europeans, not all of them, but some key European leaders again this evening, making sure that they share my assessment in terms of what's happened since the Geneva talks took place. As I said yesterday, we already have a series of additional targeted sanctions that are ready to go, and we want to make sure that we're consulting with them, assuming that we don't see any drastic changes in behavior on the part of the Russians. We'd like to see that, but we haven't assumed that. But what's also important is laying the groundwork so that if and when we see even greater escalation, perhaps even military incursion by Russia into Ukraine, that we're prepared for the sort of sectoral sanctions that would have even larger consequences. And one thing I should say about European leadership, they've been unequivocal in condemning Russia, and they have actually moved steadily when it comes to applying sanctions and consequences towards Russia. But there are a lot of countries inside of Europe, and they have a whole process that they've got to go through to deal with any actions that have significant impact on their own economies. And so there's some variation inside of Europe. That is as much of an issue as it is any differences between our assessments and theirs. And we want to work with them to make sure that we're coordinating as much as possible, because that's going to maximize our efforts. Last point, I think it's important for us not to anticipate that the targeted sanctions that we're applying now necessarily solve the problem. What we've been trying to do is to continually raise the costs for Russia of their actions, while still leaving the possibility of them moving in a different direction. And we'll continue to keep some arrows in our quiver in the event that we see a further deterioration of the situation over the next several days or weeks. As far as the Middle East is concerned, this is a problem that's been going on for 60, 70, 80 years. We didn't anticipate that we were going to solve it during the course of a 6 or 9 month negotiation. I think it's fair to say that one of my jobs as president is to worry about a bunch of different problems at the same time, and not just pick and choose which problems that I have the luxury to worry about. It is still in America's interests, as well as Israel's interests and the interests of the Palestinian people, to see if we can resolve a conflict that is combustible. And so far, at least, what we've seen is some movement on both sides to acknowledge that this is a crisis long-running that needs to be solved. What we haven't seen is, frankly, the kind of political will to actually make tough decisions, and that's been true on both sides. And the fact that most recently President Abbas took the unhelpful step of rejoining talks with Hamas is just one of a series of choices that both the Israelis and the Palestinians have made that are not conducive to trying to resolve this crisis. And I make no apologies for supporting Secretary of State Kerry's efforts, tireless efforts, despite long odds, to keep on trying to bring the parties together. There may come a point at which there just needs to be a pause, and both sides need to look at the alternatives. I've said in the past, and I will continue to repeat, Nobody has offered me a serious scenario in which peace is not made between Israelis and Palestinians, and we have a secure, democratic, Jewish state of Israel, and the Palestinians have a state. Folks can posture, folks can cling to maximalist positions, but realistically, there's one door, and that is the two parties getting together, making some very difficult political compromises in order to secure the future of both Israelis and Palestinians for future generations. We have not yet seen them walk through that door. We will continue to encourage them to walk through that door. Do I expect that they will walk through that door next week, next month, or even in the course of the next 6 months? No. Are we going to continue to try to offer constructive approaches that could lead them to go ahead and take those steps? Absolutely, and I make no apologies for that. It's the right thing to do. It's important, and it's in America's national interests as well as the interests of the region and the interests of Israel.
한국과 일본이
When it comes to Korea and
여러 가지
Japan,
안보에서 이해를
there are a number of shared interests amongst the two countries. However, there has been some conflicts going on between the two countries because of historical views. And your question is how we are going to resolve those differences. I'd like to first begin by extending appreciation to you for expressing condolences to the victims of the Sewol ferry. On this issue, at The Hague, we had a trilateral Korea-US-Japan summit meeting. So I think my talk can begin from the trilateral summit meeting. The United States, particularly President Obama, has exerted a lot of efforts for the trilateral summit to be realized in Hague. And at that summit meeting, the three countries have come to an agreement that will be coordinated efforts for resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue. However, I'd like to say that before we had that trilateral summit meeting, what the Japanese leader has done, the commitment that he has made, I'd like to trace the talks back to the Murayama dialogue or the Kuno dialogue. The leader has said that he will faithfully abide by those two dialogues, Murayama and Kuno dialogues, and that there will be some efforts for resolution of the issues related to the Korean comfort women victims. And since there has been some consensus reached, we should make sure that we do not lose that momentum and carry forward, make progress from there. So I think what it is most important that we go back to the pledges made by Prime Minister Abe, and that truthful actions be implemented from the Japan side. That is very important. And for the comfort women issue, for the victims, Korean victims, at the Director General level, at the Ministry of Finance, Foreign Affairs, there will be further consultations. We hope that there will be talks carried out at the Director General meeting, and that there will be truthfulness displayed by the Japanese side, so that we can carry on the momentum for cooperation. And if we are not able to achieve much progress as we anticipated at that moment, we won't be able to carry on to make progress from the momentum that we were able to realize at that time. With regards to the Korean comfort women victims, many have passed away, and we only have 55 remaining survivors. And I think it's very important that we come up with truthful efforts for these victims, because if we let go of this, we do not make progress in the near future, we won't be able to do anything about those victims. And therefore, by implementing truthful actions based on those commitments that we have made, we'll be able to make progress with the momentum that we were able to achieve at the time. However, important the coordinated efforts will be between those our three countries. I think efforts should be exerted by all the parties concerned. And progress cannot be achieved by efforts of a single party. And therefore, in this regard, I really look forward to efforts made by the Japanese side. Yes, Mr. Oh Nam-seok, please go ahead. My name is Oh Nam-seok of Munha Daily. I have a question for President Obama. Despite numerous warnings from the international society, North Korea is continuing with its threats for provocation. And because of the new developments of Ukraine, there are voices of concern about the possibility that the U.S. attention is going to be diverted to Europe, and that the North Korean nuclear issue is going to go down in the U.S. foreign policy priority list. I'd like to know what your ideas are for resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue. And for resumption of the six-party talks, I'd like to know if you're considering relaxing of the preconditions you set for resumption of the talks. And nextly, I'd like to talk about some conflicts going on in Northeast Asia. Korea, Japan, and China are the three countries in Northeast Asia that engage in close political and economic cooperation. In reality, they are mired in historical and territorial disputes. If we are to foster a friendly atmosphere for cooperation, what can the United States do? And with regards to Prime Minister Abe's statement at the press conference yesterday, he has made statements justifying the visit to Yasukuni Shrine by Japanese political leaders. I'd like to know your views over the historical views held by Japanese politicians.
Well, as I said earlier in response to one of your American counterparts' questions, the United States and I don't have the luxury of choosing just one problem at a time. So the North Korea situation is of direct concern to us, not only because it threatens our key allies in the region, the Republic of Korea and Japan, but it also poses a direct threat to us. Some of the missile technology that's being developed, the nuclear weapons that are being developed in North Korea, when matched up with a thoroughly irresponsible foreign policy and a provocative approach by the North Korean regime, poses a threat to the United States. And so we can't waver in our attention. We have to make sure that in strong concert with our allies, that we are continuing to press on North Korea to change its approach. Now, in terms of what the United States believes is going to be most effective, we've been very consistent over the last 5 years. We don't reward bad behavior. We don't go through a constant cycle in which provocative actions by North Korea result in dialogue that leads nowhere and concessions to the North Koreans. And we have also been consistent in saying that if North Korea is serious about talks, here are the specific steps that we can begin to take. Denuclearization has to be on the table. There has to be a discussion about how we are going to remove a key threat not only to the region but also to the world, because North Korea is also one of the principal proliferators of dangerous weapons around the world. So far, at least, we have not gotten a positive response from North Korea on that front. What's been encouraging is the degree to which China, partly because of consultations with President Xi and Madam President Park, conversations between myself and President Xi and others, China's beginning to recognize that North Korea is not just a nuisance. This is a significant problem to their own security. And we've encouraged them to exert greater influence over North Korea because China has the most significant effect on North Korean calculations. President Park and I agree that in light of what we expect to be further provocative actions from the North Koreans, whether in the form of long-range missile tests or nuclear tests or both, that it's important for us to look at additional ways to apply pressure on North Korea, further sanctions that have even more bite, as well as highlighting some of the human rights violations that make North Korea probably the worst human rights violator in the world. It is also important for us to recognize, however, that North Korea is already the most isolated country in the world by far. Its people suffer terribly because of the decisions that its leaders have made. We are not going to find a magic bullet that solves this problem overnight. What we're going to have to do is to continue with a consistent, steady approach, and the single most important thing is making sure that there's strong unity of effort between ourselves, the Republic of Korea, Japan, and other like-minded countries in the region. We have to present a strong, forceful alliance, and we have to prepare for any eventuality while still opening the prospect for a negotiated resolution to this long-standing conflict. With respect to some of the other issues in East Asia, the United States position has been clear and consistent throughout. We consider ourselves Asia-Pacific power. We don't have a stake in the specific claims that have caused some of these disputes. We're not parties to the disputes over the Senkaku Islands, for example. Our primary interest is making sure that international norms and rule of law are upheld and that disputes of this sort are resolved through peaceful diplomatic means. And we will continue to encourage all the parties concerned, whether it's Japan, China, Republic of Korea, or with respect to disputes in the South China Sea, to use the law and diplomacy to resolve these disputes. My message to China has consistently been that although clearly there are going to be differences between ourselves and China on certain issues, there are also enormous areas of cooperation. We're not interested in containing China. We're interested in China's peaceful rise and it being a responsible and powerful proponent of rule of law and an international system. In that role, it has to abide by certain norms. Large countries have to abide by rules perhaps even more than small countries because when we don't, it worries people. We want to move away from a system in which might alone makes right. We'll continue to encourage all parties concerned to take steps to resort to international norms and rule of law. We've been encouraging ASEAN and China, for example, to come up with a code of conduct that can resolve some of these maritime disputes. We will make sure that freedom of navigation and other principles that have underwritten the prosperity of the Asia-Pacific region and the growth and trade and commerce of this region continue. And we will continue to project ourselves in the Pacific to ensure that that continues. Finally, with respect to the historical tensions between South Korea and Japan, I think that any of us who look back on the history of what happened to the comfort women here in South Korea, for example, have to recognize that this was a terrible, egregious violation of human rights. Those women were violated in ways that, even in the midst of war, was shocking. And they deserve to be heard, they deserve to be respected, and there should be an accurate and clear account of what happened. I think Prime Minister Abe recognizes, and certainly the Japanese people recognize, that the past is something that has to be recognized honestly and fairly. But I also think that it is in the interests of both Japan and the Korean people to look forward as well as backwards, and to find ways in which the heartache and the pain of the past can be resolved because, as has been said before, the interests today of the Korean and Japanese people so clearly converge. You're both democracies. You both have thriving free markets. You both are cornerstones of a booming economic region. You both are strong allies and friends of the United States. And so when you think about the young people of the Republic of Korea and Japan, my hope would be that we can honestly resolve some of these past tensions, but also keep our eye on the future and the possibilities of peace and prosperity for all people. That's one of the most important lessons, I think, from the horrors of war, is being able to look back and learn lessons that allow people to avoid war in the future.
From ABC News, John Carl.
Jonathan Carl, ABC News. Madam President, thank you. Mr. President, thank you. It wasn't that long ago you were talking about a reset with Russia, and were optimistic that relations with Vladimir Putin could be dramatically improved. Did you misjudge him, or did he mislead you? And at this point, isn't it clear that sanctions simply are not going to change his behavior? And just a personal relations question. I'm sure you saw President Putin was asked that if he were drowning, would you save him? And he said he thought you would save him. So I'm just wondering, was he correct on that? And do you think that Putin would save you? And to President Park, in light of the fact that, as President Obama points out, North Korea is already the most isolated country on the planet, the most sanctioned country, what do you think should be done specifically if they go through with another nuclear test?
First of all, I absolutely would save Mr. Putin if he were drowning. I'd like to think that if anybody's out there drowning, I'm going to save him. I used to be a pretty good swimmer. I grew up in Hawaii. A little out of practice. Keep in mind that when I came into office, the idea of reset was a recognition that there were a range of issues in which U.S. and Russian interests converged. It was in our national security interests to try to foster cooperation with the Russians so that, for example, we could have alternative supply lines to our troops in Afghanistan, so that we could obtain cooperation from Russia in applying sanctions to Iran and forcing them to the table to see if we could resolve that issue peacefully. And in fact, during the first term of my administration, the approach we took resulted in concrete benefits to the national security posture of the United States. We were able to reduce weapons of mass destruction. We were able to make sure that our troops were adequately supplied in Afghanistan at times, as you'll recall, when there were some tensions within Pakistan after we conducted the raid against bin Laden in Abbottabad. We were able to bring Iran to the table, and we now have what so far at least have been constructive discussions about resolving the nuclear problem there. So those were all things that were good for us, and I believe they were actually good for the Russians as well. Mr. Putin, in my second term, has had an increasing tendency to view the world through a Cold War prism and to see Russia's interests as invariably in conflict with the West's. I disagree with him in my assessment of what's in Russia's interests, but he's the president of that country. There are still areas where we should be cooperating, on counterterrorism, for example. But his decisions recently, first with respect to supporting the horrendous bloodshed carried out by the Assad regime in Syria, and then most clearly with respect to the situation in Ukraine, it makes it much more difficult for us to cooperate, and I suspect that that's going to linger for some time to come. We'll continue to look for areas where, if it's in our national security interests, and they think it's in their interests, that we'll try to find areas where we can work together. But the violations of sovereignty and territorial integrity in Ukraine is a principle that the United States has to stand up to. Now, with respect to the impact of sanctions, you know, Russia has a deep interest in what happens in Ukraine. And I think they're going about meeting those interests in entirely the wrong way. But what's clear is, you're right, Mr. Putin is going to make decisions based on what he thinks is best for Russia, and he views Ukraine as absolutely central, critical to his foreign policy and the long-term strategic interests of Russia. That doesn't mean that he doesn't take into account other long-term interests of Russia. Tens of billions of dollars of capital fleeing Russia poses a problem for Russia's long-term interests. Russia being isolated so that no businessman or woman with any sense are going to want to invest there, that's a problem for Russia's long-term interests. And President Putin's not a stupid man, and I think recently acknowledged that this has already had an impact. And certainly if the situation gets worse and sanctions are broadened to an entire sector, that will have a more severe impact on the Russian people and the Russian economy. And so there's going to come a point at which he's got to make a fundamental decision. Is he willing to see the Russian economy that was already weakened, that was already faltering, weakened further because he's unwilling to deal with Ukraine in a diplomatic fashion that respects their sovereignty but still meets any legitimate interest that Russia may have? Or is he going to use military force and the kind of destabilizing activities that we've seen so far? That's a choice that he's going to have to make, but we shouldn't make the choice easy for him. He should recognize that the international community as a whole is not going to encourage the kinds of actions that he's taken so far.
But you acknowledge sanctions may simply not change his behavior.
Well, Jonathan, I think that's self-apparent. I think that there are no guarantees in life, generally, and certainly no guarantees in foreign policy. You know, one of the things that I think has been interesting during this entire discussion, and we've seen this on a lot of foreign policy issues over the last several years, we seem to have gotten in the habit of thinking that when there are hard foreign policy problems, that there may actually be a definitive answer. Typically, those who offer that definitive answer come up with the use of force as the definitive answer. You would think, given that we've just gone through a decade of war, that that assumption would be subject to some questioning. Certainly in my position as President of the United States and as a student of history, very rarely have I seen the exercise of military power providing a definitive answer either. So you've got some tools in the toolbox. You try to figure out which ones have the best chance of working. Sometimes it's going to take time to see whether or not a particular approach worked or not. You may not know until after the fact. But what I do know is that sanctions have consequences on Russia. And that if Mr. Putin were primarily interested in making sure that Russia is a strong, thriving nation for years to come, then he's a lot better off abiding by the agreement that we came up with in Geneva, resolving the situation in Ukraine peacefully, allowing the Ukrainians to make their own decisions about their lives so that they can have good relations both with Russia and with Europe, and businesses can continue to have confidence that if they invest in Russia or have economic relations with Russia, or Europeans can have confidence with respect to energy that they purchase from Russia, that it's not going to be suddenly disrupted because of some Russian territorial ambitions that violate international law. Good.
Madam President.
Poor President Park doesn't even remember what the other question was.
Yes, that was a long statement, I must say. So going back to the question posed to me, when nuclear test is actually carried out by North Korea, what will the Korean government do? That is the question, if I remember correctly. Now, if North Korea is actually going to carry out the fourth nuclear test, that is going to change, fundamentally change the Northeast Asian security landscape. And I believe that all our efforts to resolve the nuclear issue through six-party talks is going to be completely dissolved. It's going to go in the air. We tried to resolve the problem through dialogue, but what North Korea did was to buy time to upgrade its nuclear capability. And now, with this upgraded nuclear capability, North Korea is not willing to listen to anyone. If this is going to be the situation, there is no actual meaning in us carrying out six-party talks. And to the neighboring countries, there may be an nuclear arms race triggering. So there's actually no stopping for other neighboring countries. North Korea is not stopped. And South and North Korea's tried to improve relationship, but I think we're going to lose the momentum for the South Korean efforts to improve that relationship if the nuclear test is going to take place. And also there is a close linkage between North Korean nuclear program and others. So I believe that North Korea's nuclear capability is going to bring a serious threat to world peace too. And against the backdrop of such analysis, I believe this is not going to be a problem only for the Northeast Asian region. This is going to be a serious threat to the global peace. And if such event is going to be realized, the UN, in order to uphold peace, will have to impose very strong sanctions. That is my view. And I also believe that there is a strong role to be played by China. I'd like to emphasize the role of China. China, with regards to possession of North Korea's nuclear capabilities, testing, North Korea has strongly opposed to the idea, and it has also maintained a very strong position for the UN sanctions. So, if against a very bad situation, if China is going to maintain a very strong position, take very strong measures to make sure that China will not tolerate this situation, that is going to be very important. The trade relations, about 90% of trade relations and about 80% of economic support is going from China to North Korea, and therefore China's influence in North Korea is indeed huge. And against this very dangerous situation, I really look forward to China's leading role in making sure that the threat is not going to be translated into action. That is my hope. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President, Mr. President, members of the presidential entourage, and the press corps for your time today. This concludes the Cheongwade press conference. Thank you very much.
All right, that was the South Korea-U.S. Summit Joint News Conference at the Presidential Office of Cheongwade. U.S. President Barack Obama, visiting U.S. President Barack Obama, sat down for bilateral talks or summit with President Park Geun-hye earlier today, and that was the Joint News Conference. Now, there were a number of things that the two leaders discussed, and we will have an in-depth talk with Dr. Bong Young-sik, who joins us live or who has stayed throughout the Joint News Conference with us. But first of all, to go over the points that the two leaders made clear about, first of all, North Korea, on the North Korean issue, Presidents Park and President Obama made it very clear that North Korea's twin pursuit of nuclear program and economic development are not going to happen or go hand in hand, and that threats will not get North Korea anything, only further isolation. Now, as for the fourth nuclear test, President Park Geun-hye actually said that North Korea is ready for a fourth nuclear test anytime and will carry it out anytime that it seems is ready. However, six-party denuclearization talks will dissolve upon a fourth nuclear test. Now, of course, U.S. President Barack Obama also said that any further provocation from North Korea will not be tolerated, and that he stands hand in hand with South Korea in countering that threat. And if North Korea were to launch any further provocation, it will be met by strongly met by the international community. Also of note was U.S. President Barack Obama noting that China has begun to realize that North Korea's nuclear weapons program is a direct threat to its country as well. And President Park Geun-hye, of course, urged China to play a stronger role in persuading North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons program. Now, they also talked about the economic ties, and U.S. President Barack Obama, in fact, deemed the Korea-U.S. FTA a success in its first 2 years of being in effect, with increased trade both ways.
Right, a win-win situation for both sides. And of course, it was interesting to note President Obama opening his speech by expressing his condolences or pronouncing the Korean words in perfectly, saying "Edo" to all the families of loss who have suffered tremendous losses because of the recent ferry incident, which is probably one of the reasons why the conversation took a little bit longer than anticipated. And of course, he did reminded us all that there is no overnight, strong, powerful, instant solution with the North Korean issues at the moment. Rather, we need consistent, strong, unified effort in the region, not just China, not just Japan, not just Korea, not just U.S., but an overall effort by all sides. And of course, most of the questions were addressed to both presidents about the effectiveness of sanctions. But at the same time, right now, we are not going to simply go above and beyond to start provocative actions against North Korea or anything like that. We need to weigh possible options.
Right. However, the two leaders did say that they are looking at ways to add or further put additional sanctions on North Korea. However, a reminder by U.S. President that North Korea already is the most isolated country in the world. Of course, as for you mentioned condolences by U.S. President Barack Obama, he expressed his condolences and said "Edo" in Korean.
And brought a whole magnolia tree to be planted right in Hanwha High School. That was a very thoughtful gesture by the president.
Right. Also, he brought with him the U.S. flag that flew over the White House on April 16th. That is when the Sewol ferry sank off South Korea's western coast with roughly 300 people or students missing from that incident. Now, they also discussed the Northeast Asia conflict, where President Park said relations with Japan can only improve if Prime Minister Abe's pledges towards warming ties through thoughtful actions with regards to the so-called comfort women are carried out. And President Obama, in fact, said that he thinks that Prime Minister Abe does recognize that this is an important issue and it needs to be resolved. Now, as for the OPCON, Operation Control Transfer, U.S. President Barack Obama confirmed that they will reconsider the 2015 deadline or timeline for the operational control.
Considering the gravity of the situation at the moment. But before we go on, I think it's time for us to bring Dr. Bong Young-sik, Senior Research Fellow of the Asan Institute of Policy Studies. He's been here with us throughout this really long session, and it's time for us to turn to him for his insights on what he thought about the conference that went on recently.
Just one question before your overall assessment. The two leaders said that they will visit the ROK-US, South Korea-US Combined Forces Command tomorrow together, and this will be the first time that the leaders of the two countries will be doing that. What's the significance there?
The core purpose of the visit should be sending out very strong and clear message to North Korea that the foundation of the security partnership between Washington and Seoul is strong as it was ever. President Obama said that both leaders discussed and agreed upon how to respond to any potential provocation by North in the future. That's a very strong statement made in very specific terms. And carrying out the message in symbolic gesture would be tomorrow's visit to CFC.
Well, thank you.
Right, and what are some of the key things that we should make note of from watching an hour-long press conference, which was in fact scheduled to be roughly less than half an hour, but it went overboard and turned out to be about 70 minutes long. Your overall impression?
There are two key components that will decide the future of Northeast Asian security dynamics and international relations. One is what kind of decision that the Abe government of Japan would make with regard to the continuation of the direct general level of bilateral meetings on corner statement. There will be the critical litmus test for Abe administration's genuine commitment to resolving the historical issues. Two, both leaders speak as if Chinese government were present at the press conference, that we will watch how China will respond to North Korea if North Korea is going to conduct the fourth nuclear test. Lack of strong action, not just message, but strong action taken by China, probably in the form of U.S. Security Council resolution, if North Korea is going to conduct fourth nuclear test. There will be the critical watch point for South Korea and the United States.
Well, what's very interesting to note is that while this press conference was going on, the Chinese media announced that it's strongly urging North Korea not to carry out a fourth nuclear test. So I'm thinking that China is also very closely watching this bilateral summit between South Korea and the United States.
That's correct. But at the same time, President Park Geun-hye's answer to the question from the press seems to be even stronger than that no more talk about good intention, no more talk about utmost effort. We will watch the result. The result should be made in a clear action taken by Beijing to join international condemnation and punishment of North Korea if North Korea is going to go ahead with another nuclear test.
Right, a unified effort will be needed to bring North Korea down to earth someday soon. And China, of course, seems to be leaning more towards joining this effort. Of course, a little bit unfortunate that President Obama mentioned Senkaku without saying Diaohui, but I'm sure he is a little bit jet-lagged, as you mentioned while we were watching the coverage. Dr. Pong Young-sik, Senior Research Fellow at Asan Institute of Policy Studies. Thank you so much for being with us throughout this duration.
Thanks for the invitation. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our special live coverage of the South Korea-U.S. Summit News Conference. That was our news conference, and we will be back with the newscast, our average or our ordinary, regular newscast at 8 p.m. Korea time.
Thank you for watching.
The base of world broadcast contents. The 2014 Busan Contents Market. The age of broadcasting communication. The center of the world's new media industries. A festival where various fields of contents business are accomplished. The 8th event will be held in Busan, the visual culture industry city of Korea. The 2014 Busan Contents Market.
Asia's Heartbeat, Arirang.
Jeju, an island embraced by the sky and the sea. An island offering a healing experience. There are many things to see, eat, and enjoy. Spend time on yourself without being disturbed. Here you will be overwhelmed with joy and delight that you'll remember forever.
RT News introduces high-tech fire suits to better protect the lives of firefighters. ABC News covers how electricity is made by using wave energy and underwater buoys. VOA News looks into how the Pinger locator is used in searching for the missing Malaysia Airlines jet. Arirang TV introduces the cutting-edge features of Korean smartphones that are grabbing worldwide attention. France 24 covers the latest global issues from around the world. Hello, I'm Brian Doe from Global Business Report, bringing you the latest IT and business news from various parts of the world. Mankind's imaginations that we see only in science fiction movies are coming true in reality right before our very eyes. For example, rapid developing transparent display technology is applied to see-through refrigerators and even car hoods, with information appearing on the display in real time. These developments are giving us more and more chances to experience more cutting-edge technologies. And let's find out what kind of technologies and information will wow us today. Our first news is from RT. Firefighters often jump into the fire and risk their lives in order to save people. But what's protecting these brave men? Well, it's the fire suits that protect them. And don't worry, the latest suits consisting of aramid fibers will protect them even better. Here's the story.
Being trapped in a building engulfed in flames and filled with suffocating smoke would be a real-life nightmare. Luckily for me though, this building isn't actually on fire, yet. Even though I was in no immediate danger, I still felt the need to get out of there and leave it to the professionals. Firefighters from around Moscow have come to hone their life-saving skills at the city's 13th Special Fire Department. As well as practicing for the real thing, the firemen will